Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Myrna Wong, and I'm a technical writer here at DBT Labs. I'm thrilled to be hosting today's session, How Preset Integrates DBT with Apache Superset to deliver on Headless BI and Surface Metrics. So we'll be joined by our speaker today, Maxime Beauchemin, the founder and CEO of Preset, the experts of Apache Superset. Max has over a decade of data engineering experience at Ubisoft, Lyft, Facebook, and Airbnb. During his time at Airbnb, he created the projects that later spun out of Airbnb and became Apache Airflow and Apache Superset. So before we jump into things, some recommendations for making the best out of the session. So all chat conversations is taking place in the Coalesce How to Preset Integrates channel in our DBT Slack community. If you are not part of that chat, you still have time to join right now. So if you can visit getdbt.com/community and search for Coalesce How Preset Integrates when you enter that space. So we also encourage you to set up Slack and your browser side by side and ask other attendees questions, make any comments, react at any point in the channel. And after the session, Max will be available in the Slack channel to answer some of your questions. However, we also highly encourage you to ask questions at any point during the session. Okay, let's get started. Over to you, Maxime.
All right, let's get this started. So first I wanted to say I'm a little bit bummed to not be in New Orleans this week. I was really excited to go, but I'm just too busy, so I couldn't make it. So still excited for this talk though. So let's get things started. So today's talk title is probably one of the longest talk title I've had. It's quite a mouthful, but we'll explain all the concepts and ideas in here as we go. So the title being How Preset Integrates DBT with Apache Superset to deliver on Headless BI and Surface Metrics. I'll explain all about what is Apache Superset, what is preset, and how does it relate to that. And then talk about the concepts around Headless BI and how we integrate with DBT's metrics layer. So let's get started. So first, this is the little slide about me that I get to reuse in all my presentation. And I think it's been well covered already in my short introduction. So yeah, I've been working data for quite a while as a data engineer, as a data tools builder. Over the past decade, I've been building data tools really in the area of getting accelerating organizations to just democratize data, and that I did at Airbnb. I started Apache Airflow, Apache Superset. Apache Airflow is kind of interestingly related to DBT in a lot of ways, right? Data pipelines as code, Python, Jinja support, right? Deep support for SQL. And they kind of integrate well together. And Apache Superset, I'm going to get into a lot more detail as to what that is and how it integrates deeply with DBT. So what is Superset at a super high level? I would assume it needs little introduction, but it's always good to make sure that everyone knows what we're talking about. So Apache Superset is a data visualization and data exploration platform. It's an open source project with a large community that's very active. And it's very much in the vein of the BI tools, the business intelligence type tools. So the same space as products like Tableau and Looker, but in an open source kind of way, where the open source first approach. It's an Apache Software Foundation project. So that means we use the Apache license, but we also have a set of methodology and governance that comes from the Apache Software Foundation. So within Superset as a product, it's very much like a product, a web application that you can run and install and use for your organization. And allows you to just explore your data, create charts, assemble dashboards. We have a really powerful SQL IDE in there that allows you to write SQL if you want to use that as a source for your charts. We have support for alerts and reports. There's a visualization plugin system. So if you want to write your extend the already wide array of visualizations, you can do that. And there's a lot more that I won't get into here, notably like the integrations and the kind of ecosystem play of working with all the other open source projects and communities out there. And today we'll drill into DBT. So Superset is also like a large community used in a lot of large organizations, probably thousands, tens of thousands, tons of stars on GitHub. Very, very active project and community by all standards. Then Preset. So this is a tiny commercial bit of this presentation. So Preset offers a fully managed Superset service around Superset with, security, compliance, governance, reliability, and kind of bells and whistle on top of Superset. And we run a free offering, so you can go and try it today. So if you want to try the latest, greatest Superset, you can try it today at preset.io. And that ends the commercial bit of this talk. With that, I wanted to mention before we get into the integration per se, the technical integration between the two products, talk a little bit about the philosophical alignment. So when you think about Superset and DBT, both projects are open source, community first. Both of them allow you to get started very quickly, like very, very fast time to value, with a really nice cloud service on top if you elect to do so, right? You can go straight to DBT Core if you want. You can go to DBT Cloud if you want kind of tools and support and a managed service on top. Similarly with Superset, you can do that with Preset. And then we on both sides kind of really embody the precept behind what has emerged today as the modern data stack. Things like you have loosely coupled solution, right? That are like, so say Superset is really focused on the data consumption, data visualization layer. DBT is really focused on data transformation, in SQL. But these two things are loosely coupled, but work very, very well together. And we're thinking this is personally, I think that the future is made out of these more like loosely coupled stack that integrates well together. And in both cases, you can try before you buy. You can pay as you go. Open source and open standards before all. And more importantly, and stuff we're talking about today, this idea of assets as code, right? So Preset support what we call Headless BI. So it allows you to manage your charts, dashboards, queries, data sets as code if you elect to do so. So you have kind of this idea of like head with a head or without a head. So headless if you want. And that enables for your pipelines to be managed as code with DBT, but maybe for your data sets management and your charts and dashboard to also be manageable as code. So you can deploy things atomically, right? So you're able to say, I'm going to change my DBT project or data pipeline, if you wish. I'm going to change my charts that are built on top of it and dashboard. I'm going to test that in staging and then deploy that atomically in production. Some of the ideas and the things we're presenting today are things that are things that we dug food at Preset. So this is our very high level data flow diagram of, it's kind of interesting how we're a very small, fairly small company at Preset, right? We're a very small and mighty data team, but we were able to run all these things and kind of take advantage of the modern data stack and be a data native company. And part of the reason why we build these integration is because we're very invested ourselves in DBT and Superset and things like Airflow. We can get all these things to work well together. Cool. So I was going to do a very, very short demo of what Superset is, and that's going to be the fastest demo you've seen for a product of this complexity. So I'm going to try to switch tab and try to make sure that things still work. So trying to confirm that you all are seeing what I'm seeing. It looks about right. So we're in Superset now, we're in Preset, which is really like a managed hosted Superset. So the main difference that you would see is the logo on the upper right would be a Superset logo if you were in Superset, but it's essentially the same product with extra bells and whistle. What I wanted to show was just that in here, we have, dashboards and charts. It's pretty easy to just open a dashboard. So the quick tour is just showing this pretty basic dashboard that we have in the example that we ship with. Here you see a dashboard just as a collection of charts, some filters here on the left. And then quickly I'll jump into our Explorer. So here you have your data panel or your metadata panel on the left. You have your drag and drop type operation where you can drag and drop metrics and dimensions and things, define your filters. You have your visualization, kind of your controls here, your visualization pane and your data pane here on the bottom right. Just wanted to show a few things. So tons of visualization in Superset and a plugin system to add even more if you're interested to do so. And then I was going to pivot into, so say behind this chart, there's SQL that's generated in a certain way. So it's possible for me to go a little bit deeper and kind of show this SQL IDE here where you can navigate your schemas and build charts on top of write queries, build charts on top of it, save queries as virtual data sets, which are a little bit like models. But at a high level, that's what Superset is about. I just wanted to flash on the other menu. So we have annotation, support for annotations, alerts, some security type controls, and a handful of other things and features that I won't get into today. And back into the presentation. So I'll make sure my screen is in the right place. So that was the short demo. All right. So what I'm talking about now is a little bit more of talking about the integration per se. And then the stuff that I'm going to show now, all that code is available in this GitHub repo that we're going to look at, or that I'm going to highlight some things from that repo. Here, you can see that we're under the preset.io GitHub repo, and there's this repo called DBT S 2022, and you'll find all the examples in here with a little bit more. So here, what we're doing is just setting up some bash environment variable because we're going to be running some CLI commands. And, we go into the DBT project and just run DBT seed and DBT run to make sure we can populate things. So that's something that you should be able, if you want to follow and you want to run it later, you should be able to run that on your own on top of a preset instance if you're interested to do so as a follow-up. So now the next step I'm going to talk about is running a command where we're going to sync our DBT models and our DBT modules from the DBT project and onto the Superset instance, right? So it's going to push our DBT models as what we call Superset datasets, which are essentially the same construct. It's going to push the metrics that are defined in DBT, and then it's going to bring back the exposures. I don't know if everyone in the audience is familiar with this idea of DBT exposure. So DBT exposure is a way for DBT to know about objects that extend the DBT graph, right? So if the DBT graph is made out of tables and views and essentially models, you can say, this chart, there's this array of chart and dashboard that are built on top of these models. So DBT knows a little bit more about what's happening in the outside world. Cool. So here we're running a command. Here I'm sourcing the environment variables that we saw in the previous slide, and I'm running a preset CLI command where I'm targeting a specific workspace, which is the idea of a Superset instance. And I say Superset sync DBT core. I give it a few pointer around where my manifest is for DBT. So essentially like the DBT construction of the project. I name my project. I name my with the file where the exposure should be retrieved into, and a few other features that says like I import the DB if it doesn't exist, and a few other things. So there we are. So running this will synchronize the things. I'm going to show what it looks like in the next few screens. And then you notice we run dbt duck generate because this command will push the models and the metrics. It will bring back the exposure in the file and regenerate the docs here at the bottom so we can see what just happened. So now what we're going to see is like when you go to the Superset dataset view. So this is the view inside Superset, looking at the list of all the datasets. Datasets are, tabular constructs, very similar to the idea of a DBT model. It's a pointer to a table or a view or a virtual dataset, and then it has information about, it has metadata, kind of like pretty labels, long descriptions. It has definition of metrics that are very similar to the notion of the metrics that exist in DBT. So here you can see too that not only brings these models as data sets, but adds a nice little kind of certification icon on the left and with a little bit of text that says this table is produced by DBT. And there's a way to say if they are produced externally, you can say don't allow people to edit the data set since they are managed actively as code. And then the little I, the info bubble that you see next to it, is the description of the data set or surface. So we bring not only the data set definition, but all the pretty labels and descriptions as extra semantics that can be highlighted in the context of visualization and data consumption. Beyond that, so in this particular example, if you were to go and kind of poke around the GitHub repo, you'll find that we define DBT Metrics, which is a new construct, a fairly recent construct that DBT Core, I believe, announced in the past few months. So people are excited because DBT now not only allows for people to define models, but also define metrics. And in this case, we define a simple metric just for the purpose of the example, where we point to a model, we give the metric a description, and then we define a certain set of filters. So what happens when we ran the command that I had in just the previous slide, but by running this command here, we pull not only the model definition, but the metric definition. So here you can see that the way that we pull the metric, we do a little bit of gymnastic, where we create a kind of, I would call it scan metric. So instead of saying count distinct of order ID, as it would be with a where clause, in our case, we generate that as a count distinct. So you can do a single pass and you can mix and match these metrics, right? So if you had a metric that was a sum case when or a different kind of aggregation function with different filter clause, then they would not be, they would be compatible with each other, and we'd be able to get these multiple metrics in a single scan. So that's how we, in the context of Superset, we do our own interpretation of the filter clause and create a metric in that context. Gives you a little bit more an idea. This is the exposures I was talking about earlier. So when we run the same command as before, not only it pushes the models and metrics info, but it brings back the charts and dashboard information from Superset and into DBT, so that DBT is aware of the lineage graph beyond what it knows about itself. So here, like DBT can know there's a certain number of charts and dashboard that are highlighted in the graph. All right, now let's talk about Headless BI just for a moment. So at a high level, Headless BI is a term that is kind of reused from this idea of like headless Linux. I believe that's probably like where the term was coined, or at least that was the first time I heard that term. So a headless Linux instance is Linux just available through terminal and not through a GUI, right? So in our case, we're kind of head optional. Superset is designed as a GUI, but it's also possible to manage assets as code, and this is what we're going to demonstrate here. How does that relate to DBT? It relates to DBT in the sense that you can evolve your DBT pipelines and your charts and dashboards in a context and deploy atomically. All right, so here we have two commands that are going to be executed here, and then I'll give a little bit more context as to what's happening. But we use again the preset CLI, and in the first case we say you point to a workspace and Superset export a certain dashboard ID, and then we give it a target. So what it does when you do that is it's going to go and take this dashboard and the related objects. So to a dashboard, there will be a collection of charts. There will be things like data set definition, database connection definition. So basically everything associated with the dashboard IDs that I'm specifying here will be exported as code, as templated YAML, or as YAML that can be templated later. I'll talk about that in a moment, and dump into a folder with a bunch of subfolders with all the information that is needed to export the same assets anywhere else. The first command exports a set of assets, and the second command will import this set of asset to potentially a different destination. So it could be a different workspace, could be the same workspace. So here's the general idea: is we're exporting first, then you export typically to the file system, to a Git repo, and then you can push later on. So you could totally see how you would hook that up to continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD type scripts to deploy things atomically with your pipelines. So now what happens when we do this? So, and then you'll see that in the GitHub repo that I shared, right? And we'll have all the pointers to that if you want to go a little bit deeper. But there's a folder in that repo called Superset Assets, and it shows a single dashboard as well as the associated charts and database connections and data sets. What else to say here? So this, dump contains a bunch of YAML files. And these YAML files are introspectable. You can check them in the source control, their file, but you can also templatize them, right? So if you are interested, in this case, what I decided to do was to show that you can templatize the dashboard title, but you could templatize just anything in this file, right? And in this case, I decided to suffix. So the dashboard title is Jaffle Shop. And then I decided to suffix staging if the current environment variable, superset environment, happens to be staging, right? So sky's the limit here. You could have conditional stuff. You could say, I'm going to sync this set of dashboard to for each one of my customer to a different target, and each customer will have its name displayed, right? So there's some use cases around generating dashboards dynamically, generating white labeled superset instances dynamically. So there's a lot you can do with this. I mean, you all know how powerful templating is if you're attending the DBT conference. So I will move on. So we showed a few things here. So we showed how we can integrate models, models, how we can have this bidirectional integration, how metrics are well integrated, but this is just the start for us. So the metrics layer is kind of new. We spoke with the team at DBT, and it seems like there's much more in this area of metrics and semantics, maybe a semantic layer behind the scenes. So clearly there's a lot we want to do to integrate deeper in the future. So the first thing is this idea of supporting DBT dialects in SQL in Superset. So I mentioned and I showed how we have a SQL IDE in Superset. And the SQL IDE currently does not understand things like ref, or does not understand things like some of the metric construct. Like it speaks Jinja, but not the DBT specific flavor of Jinja. So in the future, we're interested to integrate more directly with DBT Cloud, to use DBT Cloud as a database proxy that can, can interpret DBT SQL and transform that into proper queries. We also interested to build a metrics first exploration. So I showed our Explorer in Superset, but that Superset Explorer is really built to be a dataset explorator, right? Like, so you point to a dataset, which is akin to a database, to a DBT model, and then you can slice and dice all you want this model. But we'd like to surface the metric semantics in a deeper way, right? So we would expose only what is defined around DBT metrics and make that like front and center. So pick your metrics, pick the dimensions that go with that metric, be limited to only, using the time dimensions that have been specified as working with the metric and things like that. We also heard that there might be the emergence of a DBT semantic layer down the line, right? Or like kind of expanding upon this idea of metrics. So we're interested to use that as a data source in Superset. We're also interested to make it really easy for people to configure the integration between DBT Cloud and Preset, so that you can just go in a UI and kind of point, do a OAuth type flow to say, I want to connect this Superset instance to this DBT Cloud project, and then magic happens from that point on. And then last thought in terms of like what we want to push. So Headless BI is works today in Superset, but we want to make that even more expressive and more powerful, right? So we're talking about having a really good DSL on top of the YAML that I showed to make it really easy for people to play with assets with things like charts, dashboard, data set as code. So with that concludes this most of my talk, and I'm wrapping up with this idea with just sharing some of the resources, the things we've been talking about. So we have some blog posts at Preset around announcing Preset's cloud integration with DBT. There's another blog post around delivering dashboards as code. So some of the similar ideas to the ideas I've been talking about today, but with more depth. And then you can try, like, Superset's amazing. You should try it if you haven't tried it in a while, or you haven't tried it at all. Open source data visualization BI is freaking amazing. So go and check it out. If you haven't checked it out, you're just missing out on it. So really encourage people to go and play with that. It's pretty easy to just try it for free on Preset. It takes, a few minutes to set up. And then if you have questions about our roadmap, so we're investing in these areas, right? Like, we really think the future of data visualization in BI, there's a huge place for managing assets as code, for kind of just in general, like allowing for analytics to come out of BI tool and go into like the applications and products and workflows that you use every day. So we're really pushing that direction. So if you're curious to learn more about our roadmap or want to try to influence it, or need some help getting things set up, reach out to Alex at preset.io, or directly come to the Superset Slack. Come directly on Preset. There's a million ways to get in touch with us. And then the code used in this talk and some of the information, documentation, and further pointers are on our GitHub. And with that, that concludes my talk. That's all, folks. But I will be on the Slack taking questions for the future. I stopped my Slack. I didn't want to be just distracted by my Slack, but I'm going to reopen it up and get on the channel. So happy to take questions. I'll be available until there's no more questions.
Thank you so much for such a great presentation, Maxine, and thank you so much for your time. If you would all like to join the Q&A with our speakers, stay tuned at Coalesce, at the channel Coalesce, How Preset Integrates in the DBT Community Slack. Submit your questions and comments. For the next session titled Know Your Worth, Unpacking Business Value Delivered by Data Teams, we'll be starting at 5:15, which is in about 1 hour. We hope to see you there. Maxime, thank you again for your time. This has been absolutely wonderful, and have a great day.